Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to 90 Day Fiancé latest news. It all started with a single viral photo, like many celebrity scandals do. Two female police officers were taking Jasmine Pineda into a Miami courthouse. Her hair was down and her face looked pallid. The once bright star of 90 Day Fiancé, who had made a name for herself with hot love stories and camera-ready confidence, was now on the other side of the lens. Her expression was tight, her stance was stiff, and the reality of her arrest weighed heavily on her eyes. 3 days before, she had been arrested because of a civil complaint and a criminal inquiry related to a lawsuit filed by her estranged husband, Gino Palazzolo. The charges include fraud, slander, and allegedly stealing $700,000. Fans who had been following Jasmine's rocky path from her early days on TLC to the frantic, heartbreaking scenes with Gino were shocked by her arrest, but it was also kind of expected. Their relationship had always been full of love and anger, with accusations and reconciliations getting in the way of affection. The cameras caught their ups and downs, but a storm had been brewing for months off-screen. The rumors started with whispers about money problems, accusations that Jasmine had used Gino's money for things he hadn't agreed to, and tales that their trust had been lost long before the final breakup. Fans first thought Jasmine's new relationship with a man named Matt Branasterianu was just a rebound. But within weeks, she was uploading pictures with Matt, tagging him with love, and hinting at a fresh beginning. It seems like a woman was going on to people outside. Gino thought it was a betrayal. By the end of summer 2025, the private complaints had become public. Gino said in court papers that Jasmine had taken or transferred substantial amounts of money from their shared accounts without his knowledge while they were still together. She left behind inadequate explanations and missing invoices. He said she had gone on social media and suggested that Gino was dishonest, manipulative, and emotionally abusive, which was much worse. Gino said these accusations were not only inaccurate, but they were also timed to hurt his reputation, just as he was making new business and sponsorship opportunities. The lawsuit asked for $700,000 in damages for lost income, injury to reputation, and emotional distress. People who know Gino said this was not like him. He had been tolerant and even shy when Jasmine was being moody. He informed close pals that the treachery was too deep to forgive. Jasmine, on the other hand, didn't appear to care. She wrote mysterious captions like, "Some people never value what they had until it's gone, and the truth always comes out." Her admirers picked over every word. Some people justified her by saying Gino was being mean, while others said she was being manipulative. Jasmine smiled in selfies the whole time, and her tone was defiant. But 3 days ago, the illusion of control fell apart. Police records say that 2 female policemen showed up at Jasmine's condo complex early that morning with a warrant for her arrest. The charge sheet contained fraud and defamation under state law, which were connected to Gino's legal complaint, and fresh proof that transactions had been faked. She was gently led out of the premises to avoid a media circus, but by the afternoon, her booking photo appeared online. The courtroom setting was rather bare. Jasmine sat quietly next to her lawyer, and every now and again she looked at the reporters sitting behind the fence. The prosecutor went over the accusations: lying about money, making improper transfers, and making a pattern of public statements meant to hurt Gino's name and profession. Her lawyer quickly responded by calling the lawsuit an exaggerated act of revenge fueled by jealousy. Jasmine pleaded not guilty. As the hearing drew to an end, cameras saw her being brought down the corridor. Her wrists were no longer tied, but she was losing her cool. The pictures were all over the place in a few hours. Fans wrote thousands of comments on Instagram, saying things like, "She doesn't deserve this," and "Justice for Gino." She brought it on herself. Fame destroyed them both. The viral turmoil turned into its own trial, with hashtags instead of legal filings. Gossip bloggers and influencers shared pictures next to each other that showed the beautiful aspect of Jasmine's life and the realities of her life in court. Some former cast members of 90 Day Fiancé offered support, while others gave veiled shade. It was said that the animosity between Jasmine and Matt was building behind the scenes. He had been beside her during the early stages of the probe, standing by her side as rumors spread. But now, there were rumors that the authorities were also looking into his role in some financial transfers. It was still unclear if he was involved or just caught up in it because he was close by. Still, his presence in her life, which was one of the things that made Gino angry, suddenly seemed to make the issue worse instead of better. The lawsuit meant more to Gino than just money. People who knew him said he was determined to get his dignity back. A common friend told me he loved her once. But he also felt ashamed. He couldn't just let it go when he saw her showing off a new relationship after everything he had done for her. But Gino's success was far from inevitable. It's well known that it's hard to win defamation claims, and proving financial fraud in a shared home can be legally complicated. Jasmine's team started to build a defense based on consent, saying that all the money in question was given freely and that anything she said online was just her opinion, not a lie. They also suggested that Gino's petition was a sort of coercion, a tactic to punish her for moving on with her love life. At the same time, the public's interest only grew. Every day, entertainment sites posted new stories about her court appearances, spoke about possible plea deals, and posted old clips from 90 Day Fiancé as if they were looking for hidden clues. The show made it hard to tell the difference between real life and reality TV. Days later, Jasmine was released on bond with harsh conditions. She had to give up her passport, not talk to Gino, and not talk about the issue in public. But as expected, she couldn't help but send a short message on social media. "I'm innocent. The truth doesn't need to scream, it will shine." It was quickly taken down, probably because of legal advice, but screenshots stayed. As her lawyers got ready for the next hearing, reporters started to look into things more. Gino sent in financial documents that showed bank transfers of almost $300,000 over 2 years, often labeled as personal support. However, investigators noted that some of those transfers were made after the couple had separated, which raised questions about whether they were gifts or fraudulent extractions. At the same time, Jasmine had posted a series of statements on social media, since removed, that accused Gino of manipulating her and trying to buy loyalty. Gino's lawyers said that such remarks hurt his reputation directly and cost him a business partner. Jasmine's defense said that these were emotional responses, not planned attacks, and that Gino had given bloggers private information to influence the story. The court, stuck between two competing realities, set a discovery hearing to look at the financial records and conversations of both sides. People's opinions were split along anticipated lines. Jasmine became a symbol of how weak women are in a cruel system for her admirers. Her critics said she was a cunning opportunist who was finally being held accountable. Once her intensity, her volatility, and her refusal to bow made her a television star. Now those same attributes have become problems in the public eye. The tabloids in Miami termed it the reality divorce of the century. Reporters set up camp outside her house. Neighbors said they saw her pacing the balcony late at night and talking on the phone in short, angry spurts. Matt came by less often. Friends said that stress was getting to them. "She isn't sleeping," one person said. "She feels like the world is against her." Gino, on the other hand, generally stayed quiet and seemed calm in the few pictures that came out. People close to him said he had become systematic, working with lawyers and accountants and avoiding interviews. "I'm just letting the truth come out," he told one reporter in passing. Nothing more, nothing less. As the weeks went by, a more complex story began to emerge. A story about how fame and closeness can hurt each other when they are always around each other. For years, cameras, tales altered for shock effect, and fan comments that blended entertainment and truth had taken over Jasmine and Gino's lives. Every fight turned into content. Every time they made up, it was just guesswork. The line between acting and real feelings had already blurred by the time the cameras stopped rolling. Now in court, the effects of that collapse were happening in real time. You could use every chat, post, and money transfer as evidence. Even love letters, which used to be private notes of love and rage, were put on display and analyzed for their meaning and truth. We don't know what will happen with the case in the future. Lawyers said that Gino's $700,000 claim might lead to a settlement, which could be a private deal with retractions, payments, and non-disclosure provisions. Some people think the lawsuit could grow and include Matt if further financial problems come to light. Even if Jasmine is found not guilty of a crime, her public image may never be the same. But she keeps fighting. Her lawyers have filed petitions saying that some of the evidence is not genuine because of mistakes made in the process. Her PR team now runs her social media profiles, which promote neutral lifestyle stuff including workout regimens, encouraging phrases, and pictures of everyday life. But the comments always reminded her. People keep asking the same questions under every post. Did you take from him? Are you going to prison? Was it worth it? For Gino, the case proves his point, but doesn't really end things. His public image may become better, but the inner scars from years of love that resulted into lawsuits are still there, even though he seems calm. This narrative might not be about who wins in court, but rather what is sacrificed when intimacy turns into performance. People used to love Jasmine Pineda for how intense she was, and how she could make people feel her joy and sadness. Now that same passion drives a tragedy that she caused herself, or maybe one that fame made inevitable. The story of Jasmine and Gino, which includes love, betrayal, money, and the media, is a warning about how hard it is to live in the spotlight. The fans still watch, remark, and judge. But behind the headlines, a lady is on trial, a guy is looking for justice, and a narrative that shows us that reality TV doesn't really end when the cameras stop rolling. Jasmine is currently waiting for her next court hearing. Gino's lawyers are still trying to get damages. Matt is still seeing her, although not as much, and the internet is still buzzing with rumors. We don't sure if Jasmine Pineda will climb again or stay out of favor for good. But one thing is for sure. The queen of 90 Day Fiancé fame is now up against the most harsh audience of all. The truth. It felt like a slow-motion hurricane during the weeks after Jasmine Pineda was arrested. Every morning, the loud ring of her phone reminded her of the gavel that had sealed her fate in the courtroom. She had gone back to her apartment under bail conditions that seemed more like being locked up than being free. She had to give up her passport, not talk to Gino Palazzolo, and not talk about the matter in public. Even though there were rules, the media sought every way to get in the way, creating a story that didn't leave any room for privacy. 90 Day Fiancé star faces $700,000 lawsuit. Jasmine Pineda's arrest sparks outrage, and reality star in courtroom showdown with ex-husband were two of the most popular headlines on the internet. People on social media had strong opinions on both sides, with some defending Jasmine as a wronged woman and others calling her a manipulative opportunist who is finally facing the consequences of her actions. The public court was already in session, and she didn't have a lawyer to shield her from what millions of strangers would say about her. Jasmine spent her days going over court papers, emails, and other information, her thoughts flying between strategy and disbelief. People were looking at every transaction she made while she was married to Gino and said they were bad or dishonest. Some were regular payments to cover home bills, while others were gifts to relatives or donations to charity. None of these would have raised eyebrows on their own, but in the middle of a court battle and a public show, everything may be seen as part of a bad pattern. As she reread letters where she and Gino laughed about money or had fun disputes over it, Jasmine could feel the weight of the story crushing down on her chest. Those private conversations had turned into weapons in a fight she could scarcely understand. Matt Branasterianu, who had always been there for her, was starting to fade into the background. He came by less often and often seemed exhausted or unsure, as if he could feel how strong the storm was and was afraid of the harm it might cause. Their talks had become careful and filtered, worried about the legal consequences and the photographers who were often watching from outside the building. Every move and word was watched, something Jasmine used to love, but now found smothering. She remembered how the cameras used to follow her about with love, recording her smiles, joy, and tears for everyone to see. The cameras were now unrelenting and accusing, showing her tiredness, anxiety, and frustration as guilt. The following step in the court case was discovery. Lawyers on both parties carefully looked through every bank statement, wire transfer, email, and message that Jasmine, Matt, and Gino had sent and received over the preceding few years. Jasmine's lawyers said that a lot of the transactions Gino talked about were either already approved or concerned accounts that both of them had access to. They also said that Jasmine's public utterances, even though they were carefully framed, were opinions and not defamation. Gino's team responded by saying that certain transfers happened after the separation had started, which was an obvious violation of previous agreements, and that several statements made on social media and in interviews were meant to hurt Gino's reputation. During the discovery phase, communications and pictures were searched for the smallest signs of intent, motive, or carelessness. People were still really interested in the narrative, though. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and fan forums were like courtrooms, where every post or comment was seen as proof of guilt or innocence. Memes spread quickly, putting together clips from Jasmine's old reality show with pictures of her in court, showing how her glamorous past was different from her messy present. Some comments were sympathetic, like "she looks tired," "the system is unfair," while others were harsh, like "this is what happens when you live off manipulation." News outlets covered every development in great detail, looking at facial expressions, wardrobe choices, and guessing about strategy and emotion. Jasmine couldn't go outdoors without witnessing how people judged her in the eyes of her neighbors, delivery drivers, or anyone she didn't know. Her personal life, which used to be full of spontaneity and love, had become strict and careful. She didn't make any needless excursions, kept phone calls to a minimum, and spent hours with her lawyers going over possible testimony and building defenses. She didn't sleep well, and when she did, it was in short bursts as she thought about each piece of evidence, each public comment, and each possible technique that Gino's team would use. Matt tried to make them feel better, but their conversations had become almost clinical, with his reassurances mixed with legal caution and his own fear of being involved. They used to be close, but now they were under a lot of stress since they were being watched, and were always afraid that even a small mistake may be used against her in court or in the media. The first sessions before the trial were very stressful. Jasmine's lawyers asked Gino for more documents because they thought some of the transfers weren't real and wanted more information about when the alleged defamatory statements were made. Gino's lawyers fought back, saying that these requests were just ways to stall the case. The judge, who was getting more and more annoyed with the procedural messes, told both sides that the court's resources were limited and that they should work together. Every hearing was recorded and shared on news networks and social media. Live feeds and internet comments made the courtroom feel even more intense. People thought that every pause, gaze, and sigh was a sign of strategy, worry, or guilt. In the middle of all the legal trouble, Jasmine thought of her life before the reality program made personal strife more important. She thought back to quiet mornings with Gino, times when they could laugh together without worrying about what others thought, and hopes of a stable family life. Now those memories were seen through the lens of treachery, legal trouble, and public attention. It was hard to understand how things had changed so much from love and drama to dread and consequence. The camera had previously shown love and drama, but now it showed fear and consequence. Gino, on the other hand, kept his cool in public, even though he was very focused on his goal. He worked hard with accountants, private investigators, and his legal team behind closed doors to make sure that every part of the case was strong. Friends and coworkers noticed how careful he was. He kept track of schedules, spreadsheets, and labeled texts like military operations. He didn't make many public appearances, and when he did, he was careful about what he said. Each statement made by his lawyers stressed principle over passion. To his fans, he was the perfect example of a calm and methodical search for justice. Critics said he was unrelenting and even punishing, showing how legal authority can change the way people talk about things. As the discovery phase went on, fresh facts came to light that raised the stakes. Emails came to light that said some of the shared costs had been misrepresented in social media posts. Screenshots of conversations between Jasmine and Matt were also open to several interpretations, some of which may be seen as incriminating. People might argue about everything and guess what would happen next. Jasmine's defense team worked hard to put these messages in context by focusing on intent, time, and previous agreement. However, the fact that the media spread fragmentary evidence so quickly made it feel like there was always pressure. She felt like she was on a reality show where there was no break from the cameras and every private detail could become a big headline. The following time they went to court, things got really tense. There were a lot of reporters and admirers in the gallery. Some held up signs of support for Jasmine, while others just watched quietly, waiting for what they thought would be a big change. The judge heard motions on whether or not some digital communications and financial records might be used as evidence. The arguments were technical but very emotional, with each side trying to shape the story in their favor. Jasmine watched intently, her nerves on edge, knowing that every decision would affect not only the case but also how the public saw her, which was already starting to define her. The media frenzy outside the courthouse grew. Tabloid newspapers wrote long articles about Jasmine's social media history, putting together pieces from years ago to show how she acted. Influencers and amateur detectives picked apart live streams, short clips of interviews, and old episodes of 90 Day Fiancé, often making up stories that sounded like they were true. Jasmine felt like she was being watched and erased at the same time. Her own voice, which was already limited by her lawyer, was drowned out by the noise of speculation and guesswork. Matt tried to protect her from some of the stress, but people were still interested in him and talked about him behind his back. Personal interactions outside of the media and legal worlds started to get tense. Friends who had been there for her in secret were worried about being seen with her in public. Invitations to social events dropped off, and even casual meetings became planned, with every word and gesture seen as possible evidence or remark. Jasmine found comfort mainly in long hours spent going over evidence, working with lawyers to come up with a plan, or talking to a therapist every now and then. She was trying to stay grounded in the middle of all the legal, social, and emotional stress. The pretrial phase showed both weaknesses and strengths. On one side, holes in the paperwork or different memories of some transactions made the situation more dangerous. On the other side, detailed notes, witness statements, and supporting evidence gave the defense options. Jasmine's team carefully sorted through emails, photos, and financial records to build arguments that would put the transactions in perspective and rebut charges of defamation. Every night, Jasmine read through these things. She was both tired and energized, knowing that the approaching trial would be important not just for the case, but also for her public image and sense of control over her life. Gino kept going after his target in a methodical way from a distance. He kept a low profile in public, but his lawyers were quite aggressive in submitting papers and demands, making it clear that they would use any perceived mistake against him. His plan seemed to be not only to get money damages, but also to take control of a story that he thought Jasmine had been in charge of since they broke up. People who knew him said he was determined to protect both his money and his public image, a goal that was both personal and professional. During this time, the media focused on how different Jasmine's private life was from her public persona. Headlines focused on courtroom drama, viral photographs, and guesswork, while lengthy articles tried to follow the events that led to her arrest. People were still tremendously interested in the public. Every look, clothing, or casual remark was up for discussion and study. Algorithms on social media made the story bigger, making echo chambers where stories with very different points of view thrived. Jasmine felt stuck in a world where her personal decisions, which used to be fun to talk about, were now reasons for public judgment and legal trouble. As Matt tried to figure out what his part in this play was, he became more and more careful. He knew that people were watching how he interacted with Jasmine, how much money he gave her, and how often he was with her. He still gave emotional support, but he became less visible. Instead, he planned carefully, had private chats, and participated strategically in legal meetings. Their relationship, which used to be spontaneous and close, had become more businesslike, with a focus on risk assessment and preparation for what could happen. The pretrial process grew into a psychological marathon as the weeks went into months. Jasmine was anxious because of the constant media coverage and the upcoming trial. Every day, there were new files, new interpretations, and new comments from the public. Sleep was hard to come by, and when it did, it was full of dreams about being in court, being humiliated in public, and losing all your money. Matt's presence was comforting, but even when they were silent, they were always aware of being watched, both legally and socially. Gino's plan kept going. Legal documents got more and more thorough, recording every transaction, post, and interaction that could be seen as harmful. He looked for other witnesses who could back up charges of financial mismanagement or public defamation. His comprehensive approach showed that he was committed to making sure the case could stand up to scrutiny and maybe stop settlement talks that could have made it less accountable. At the same time, Jasmine's lawyers got ready for a number of different possibilities. They wrote counterarguments, found possible flaws in Gino's assertions, and came up with a full defense plan that centered on consent, intent, and how to read public remarks. They thought about both civil and possible criminal consequences and worked to put Jasmine in a position where she could not only survive in court, but also protect her reputation. Social media kept being both a source of stress and a source of help. Some fan groups worked behind the scenes to help Jasmine by raising money for legal help and sending her words of support. Some others took advantage of every mistake she made to make her look careless or dishonest. The fact that these reactions were both positive and negative put a strain on both the mind and the heart, since both were happening at the same time, frequently in the same digital locations. When court hearings happened, they were very well-planned events. There was a lot of security, the media was kept in check, and the legal teams were given very detailed instructions. Jasmine and Matt got there early and dealt with the logistical and emotional challenges of each session. The judge, who was focused on making sure the process was fair, sometimes scolded both sides for taking too long or not submitting everything they needed to. He stressed the importance of quick litigation. The courtroom felt both small and big, like a stage where private information was made public and every contact was carefully thought about. In this tense situation, Jasmine had to deal with both legal problems and deep personal contemplation. The end of her marriage, the loss of trust, and the constant attention from the media made her think about her prior choices, what they meant, and who she was. She struggled with guilt, anger, and the need to be forgiven while also being responsible. Gino, on the other hand, had to think about how the public saw him and how the law worked. He still didn't talk to the media often, preferring to write comments instead of giving interviews. But through surrogates and public filings, he kept up a story of a conscientious quest for justice, focusing on restoring his reputation and financial integrity. His planned approach was different from the emotional ups and downs that had been part of previous contacts. This showed that he was changing his strategy in response to both legal and public pressure. The trial date, which had been established months in advance, was finally here. Preparations got more intense. Witness statements were finished, expert testimonies were set up, and evidence exhibits were carefully arranged. Jasmine's team went over every possible question, practiced their answers, and thought about how to deal with attacks they thought might happen. Anxiety was still high, but careful planning and a growing understanding that resilience, calmness, and smart thinking will be important helped. There had never been so many reporters at a trial before. Outside the courthouse, cameras, reporters, and social media stars all gathered to record every arrival, every look, and every encounter. People who liked Jasmine stood on one side of the street with signs of support, while people who liked Gino stood on the other side with cameras and microphones ready. Inside, the courtroom was set up for close observation, with every seat taken, every motion watched, and every word possibly recorded for future generations. Jasmine walked in gently, with Matt and her legal team on either side of her. Her face seemed calm, even though she was excited about what was going to happen. The trial started with opening comments, in which Gino's lawyers told a story of intentional lying, bad money management, and public defamation. Jasmine's defense told a story that focused on permission, context, and how complicated public declarations may be. Witnesses were called, evidence were shown, and lawyers asked a lot of questions, all in an effort to prove their side's legitimacy, intent, and impact. The media caught every little thing that happened during the trial. People spoke about, examined, and broadcasted facial expressions, body language, and little movements. There was a lot of speculation, memes, and comments on social media, which made it like a second court of public opinion. Jasmine moved through the proceedings with careful resolve, knowing that not only were her legal actions being watched, but also how the public saw them. As the testimony went on, days became into weeks. Financial experts looked at transactions, social media posts were broken down, and character witnesses talked about what they saw and how they interacted with the people involved. The intense scrutiny was hard on Jasmine and Matt, but Gino watched with measured detachment, his team skillfully controlling the presentation of evidence and questioning of witnesses. As the trial went on, the underlying dynamics became clearer and clearer. The interplay of personal history, public character, and legal strategy generated a multifaceted tapestry of motivations and interpretations. Jasmine's earlier choices were reinterpreted, her public persona both condemned and vindicated, and the distinction between performance and reality became indistinct under rigorous legal and societal scrutiny. In this environment, the human cost was clear. Jasmine felt more tension, had trouble sleeping at times, and had deep moments of self-reflection. Matt had to deal with his personal problems while also being both supportive and protective. He had to find a balance between being emotionally involved and being careful. Gino looked calm, but he was actually under a lot of stress since he had to plan a legal strategy while keeping his public reputation intact. In the end, the trial showed how personal ties, media attention, and legal responsibility can all come together. Jasmine Pineda, who was formerly famous for her role on a reality show, was now in court, where her acts were being analyzed and interpreted in many ways. Gino Palazzolo wanted both compensation and justice, so he worked hard to find a legal and public answer. Matt Branasterianu had to deal with the difficulties of being close to scandal, while also being loyal and taking risks. The outcome was still unknown, depending on how the law was argued, how evidence was interpreted, how credible witnesses were, and how the judge saw things. But the trial showed how deeply living in the public eye can affect people's lives, where personal choices, public expression, and media coverage all come together to make stakes that go far beyond individual relationships. As the court closed for the day, cameras caught Jasmine leaving with Matt by her side. She looked calm, but her eyes showed how heavy her heart was. The media kept talking about it outside, supporters and critics had very different opinions, and the conversation on social media kept changing. The story of Jasmine Pineda, Gino Palazzolo, and Matt Branasterianu, which was based on love, treachery, and the effects of being in the public eye, was a clear example of how complicated things can get when private and public life mix. Even though the legal fight was far from over, Jasmine's arrest, viral attention, and trial preparation had already changed her. Every conversation, every post, and every time they went to court added to a story of strength, weakness, and the constant stress of being famous. In the next few weeks, there would be more developments, each with the power to change reputations, affect results, and leave lasting impressions on both the people involved and the global public that was watching them closely. The story went on, a testament to the never-ending interplay of human emotion, legal responsibility, and the public eye, where the line between entertainment and reality is always shifting, and where every choice, post, and action under scrutiny changes the lives of those in the spotlight forever. This gossip is over. If you liked the video, then give your opinion in the comment box and stay with us by subscribing the channel. Thank you.